Hello, welcome back to the channel. It's me, Emmy the Cat Lady, and you join me here at Hoover Dam. There is some explosions happening in the background. I've no idea what's going on. But yeah, we're here at the dam because we're going to talk about the water cycle. So we have discussed the water cycle quite in depth when talking about the capital wasteland and how water moves through the ecosystem. So water evaporates up into the atmosphere to form clouds and then falls as rain or snow, and then it gets into the ground where living things like plants and animals take the water in, and then living things lose water by excretion or evaporation, and it returns to the cycle and it kind of starts again. But there is water kind of deep underground as well, the water table. And we have fresh water and salt water. So fresh water would be like lakes here and rivers, and obviously saltwater is your seas and oceans. So the biggest difference between the capital wasteland and the Mojave Wasteland is that the water in capital wasteland is contaminated and irradiated, which is kind of the point of the main story. We're starting a water purifier to make it not radiated and contaminated. But in the Mojave, it's different. So we're gonna, if I can remember how to press the right button, we're gonna head down. No, we're not gonna go there. We're gonna go like Las Vegas. Yeah, let's do that. I could probably jump in and swim across, but we're gonna just over here. So yeah, this is Lake Las Vegas, and its larger sibling Lake Mead is nearby. And oh, there we go, big splash. So as you can see, no rads, and the water's looking quite healthy. We've got underwater plants. There's a bit of rubbish and stuff, and that golf cart. I think it's a golf cart. But we've got aquatic plants thriving here. Everything's looking nice and green. We've got fish. It's great. So there's no ocean in this area. Obviously, we're on the west side, but we're not on the west coast because Nevada is landlocked. We're not near the Pacific Ocean or anything like that. But the fresh water is clean, it's radiation free, and it's sustaining aquatic life really, really well. Which is really good. So yes, this is Camp Golf, Mr. House's golf resort. So Lake Mead is spotless. I mean, okay, there's a plane down there and there's bits of rubbish and things like that, but there's no radiation. The fish are fine. They don't really seem to be kind of changed. Like they're not, mutated or anything. Is at least not obviously. It's hard to be sure because obviously we can't really interact with them, but they just look like normal fish swimming about doing their thing. So it does seem to be that life is flourishing fairly well. There are lake lurks, which we do see mainly in Lake Mead itself, and they're obviously kind of related, named after the mire lurks that we see on the east coast, but there is quite a fundamental difference in that lake lurks are thought to be mutated from turtles, likely by FEV. But they also seem to not mind the clean water, whereas as we talked about in the capital wasteland, in fact, I think that's one in the distance there, because they do kind of look like people as well. The mirelurks can't cope with the clean water, so when you turn the purifier on in Fallout 3 and the water's clean, the mirelurks are dying, whereas the lake lurks, they seem to be doing pretty well in the nice clean water here. They're not harmed by it, they're thriving in the clean water, they probably eat the fish, but everything in here is just teeming with life, and that's how it should be. The Colorado River is much the same. We've got the fish, we've got the plants, the seaweed. Well, it's not really seaweed, but aquatic plants and schools of fish. Which is always nice to see. I do like that. I like watching fish. I've recently in my free time I have been playing a fair bit of Mega Aquarium, because it's just such a chill game that you're just building fish tanks and collecting animals, and then you can walk around and it's all very cute. But a lot of the man-made water systems here are also equally radiation-free and clean. So Good Spring Source, most of the places on the Strip and in Freeside. There are places where it is contaminated. You know, there is a quest at the sharecropper farms, the NCR farms, where they're having some issues with crop yields, and it's because the water that they're getting is irradiated. But that water's coming from Vault 34, which is very, very much full of rads and ghouls, and that radiation, it's not really coming from the bombs, it's actually coming from the nuclear reactors in the vault that powered the vault. So that's kind of the big difference there as well. You know, because this area wasn't touched by the bombs to a significant degree compared to elsewhere, it's meant that a lot of the water systems and things are nice and clean. And of course, the Mojave is a desert by definition. But remember that it doesn't mean that there's no water at all. It's just that the amount of precipitation is what defines a desert. So it's about rainfall or snowfall. In this case, obviously rainfall. Snowfall in this area is pretty rare, unless you're up in the mountains. And the Capital Wasteland is also a desert, but that only became so after the bombs and after a massive inferno that killed all the trees and things like that. Well, the Mojave here has been a desert for a long time. So what that means is that the plants and the animals that are native to the area are well adapted to that particular environment, because that's how nature works. So the evolution is evident everywhere, because if you were to take a camel and put it in Antarctica, it's going to die. If you take a polar bear and put it in the Sahara Desert, it's going to die, because species are adapted to the environment that they are native to and that they live in. So their behaviours and their physiology and their anatomy matches it. Polar bears have, thick fat layers under their skin, and they have these really thick double coats that help keep their bodies warm and help them cope in the extreme cold. There's even fish that actually can produce antifreeze in their blood so that they can survive being frozen for the winter. So, species do have adaptations to their native environment. If you move them out of their native environment, they might struggle. In hot deserts like the Mojave, we do have species that are incredibly able to conserve water so that they can cope with periods of drought. So a lot of your plants, you're looking at cacti like the barrel cactus, you're looking at succulents like the agave. They have features that allow them to conserve and retain water inside them for a long period of time so that they can hang on until the next rainfall comes along. But yeah, so the cactus and succulent plants are they do have a few things in common. So they have these large, thick leaves and stems that have specialist cells in there that act as water reserves. And they also have a waxy outer coating that reduces the amount of water that evaporates from the leaves into the atmosphere. So it's all designed to kind of keep water inside the plant. And they're actually so well adapted to low rainfall that they actually don't really like overwatering. So if you've ever had cacti or succulents as houseplants, you'll know what I mean. I do have 3 little succulents that I raised from seed. There's 2 agave and 1 that I think is some kind of aloe, not aloe vera, but related. And I forgot to check on them for like 3 months over winter, and they're fine. They're looking strong, but if I was to water them every week, they would probably die. There's also plenty of trees in the Mojave Wasteland, and again, these are all trees that are well adapted to surviving without water, although their adaptations are a wee bit different. So your banana yucca, the Joshua tree, which you do see in places. See if I can find one. be able to find them all. And then the creosote bushes as well that are kind of dotted around. There's so many. There's so many different plants and things, but the trees, like your banana yucca, your joshua tree, your honey mesquite, and they all have really long roots that penetrate deep into the ground so that they can reach the water table and the water that's under the ground, and that they do have to go quite far in order to get that. So they do have these really long roots that punch right down into the ground to get to water. And because the nukes did little damage to the Mojave, it does mean that the plants and the life is grown really well in this location. Everything's thriving because there's not been as much damage. And that's great because it provides an important source of food for both animals and people. Water is life, but even in a desert, it's more readily available than you might think. And that can be different. It depends on the kind of desert as well. So, the Sahara Desert, for example, is very, very different to this kind of desert. Again, it's closer to the equator and a lot drier, and that's the reason that, the ancient Egyptians set up shop along the Nile, because they needed to be near a source of water, and crossing the Sahara Desert is extremely difficult because the water is so difficult to find. But it's different kind of desert, different climate altogether. But again, the species that live there are well adapted to living with limited access to water. So life in the desert, it's more plentiful than a lot of people might think. People talk about deserts as being these kind of empty, wastelands, lifeless places where nothing really survives, but that's definitely not the case. And there is plenty of creatures and plants that can live in these harsh environments as long as they have the adaptations for it. Because that's how evolution works. You either adapt and survive, or you don't adapt and don't survive. That's kind of how it works. But yeah. And this is one of the biggest reasons that I think the Mojave Wasteland is far more successful and easier to survive in. I mean, as long as you avoid the death claws and the cazadors and the fiends, nightkin, feral ghouls, legion, night stalkers, you get the picture. But food and water is more readily available, and fresh food is more readily available. So both, the animals that you've got, the bighorn or sheep, are available. The mole rats and all the rest of it, but also, plant food is much more readily available. People can actually grow crops like maize. They can grow jalapenos. They can grow all these different things, and they can actually provide fresh food, and not that terrifyingly well preserved and highly processed fare that you can find in the super duper mart. Which is questions should be asked about the kind of preservatives that are in that stuff, that it's still safe to eat over 200 years later, but I digress. And that's what we're going to be thinking about and talking about next week is the food web. So it is going to be even bigger and more complicated than Fallout 3's was, because we've got more creatures, we've got more plants, and things end up just a wee bit more kind of convoluted and complicated, but it's going to be very interesting, I think, to have a look at the food web. So I should have another big chart for you for next week when that's done. And yeah, so water is life, but life always finds a way. That's the kind of gist of that, I think. I still don't know what those explosions are. I don't know if it's like the background sound from the Battle of Hoover Dam is still playing for some reason. I don't know, but there's a lot of explosions happening in the background here, and I don't really know why. But anyway, that's me signing off, and I will catch you guys next time. Bye.